Hello, this is Penny Sansaberry,
And Amy Cornell.
and this is the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast, and it's launch day, June 20th. So excited. The book is launched, and the print book launches on the same day. Had a lot of requests for the print book. My print books tend to be really popular anyway. I think people just, they want to hold them, they want to write in them, they want to highlight in them, which I love. Anyway, that's, if you were deterred from getting the ebook, deter no more, because the print book launches the same day. So I'm really excited about that. And I want to thank everybody for your support, and got some really, really, really nice emails from authors about how excited they are for the next book and things like that. And I'm going to keep writing. I'm hoping to release another book this year, aside from that's actually not Amazon focused. I know, what a shock. So there is a lot more coming, but the conversation today is a really interesting, it just comes up more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to be a really hard no on this, and we'll talk a little bit more in the show about how that's changed. And the issue is paying for reviews and coverage. And Amy, you actually stumbled on this. I don't want to get too far ahead of what we've outlined in the show notes, but you stumbled on this conversation in Reddit, right? We love Reddit. We just love Reddit. We totally
Yeah.
Reddit.
The interesting part, and this kind of goes along with, we did a show on chat, GPT, and AI, and how helpful it can be and things like that. So this is an interesting kind of blend of that conversation and then the topic today. But apparently on Reddit I was seeing conversations about authors getting more and more wary of paying for reviews, specifically from review outlets, because a lot of authors seem to think that these pay-to-play reviews are being written by AI now, and they're not actually getting a thoughtful review from an individual that's really read their book.
Yeah,
and I found that really interesting too, just to add one more, factor, consideration to this conversation about when to do it, when not to do it, all the things you have to consider. But they specifically said, and I thought this was interesting, and again, not to get off into an entirely different conversation, but for what it's worth, they said, I wanted to get this review because I'm just starting out and I need reviews. I don't know how else to get them. So I definitely paid for some reviews, but some of the reviews they were getting back, they said, just didn't sound like they were written by somebody that actually read the book. And this one author said that the review that they got actually revealed some of their biggest plot twists and spoilers.
Oh, no.
Yes. And so they said, I paid for it thinking, okay, I'm just starting out. I'm a debut author. I'm going to invest a little bit to get some reviews from these known outlets, and then the review came back and they said, I can't even use it because I don't want to reveal this,
Yeah.
So they were in a really tough spot. But so when I saw that, and then I brought it to, we chatted about it. I just said, as if we needed to make this more complicated for authors to decide when it's appropriate or potentially, you should consider paying, and when you should definitely step away from that. Like, you know what I mean? So this just adds a whole other layer. The idea that, getting AI involved and having it make things easier on some of these outlets, but then it's like, wow, then what are you actually getting? What are you paying for?
Yeah. And, I mean, I feel, listen, listeners, I feel your desperation. Like, I get it, because it's gotten harder and harder to find legitimate reviews, review sources. And part of the reason for that is just because there are so many books published, right? So there's limited number of people who have the time to read for free. I mean, we still work with we continue to work with a lot of really amazing influencers. And if you're listening, shout out to y'all, because you do amazing work. But, even then we've seen influencers look, my to be read pile is 72 books deep, and so you're going to be waiting for 3 months. And a lot of times, it's both like you said, the author on Reddit who said, look, I'm new, and in other cases, the author just just like realized, oh my gosh, my book is coming out next week. I need a review. And they feel this pressure, this general industry pressure that I have to get lots and lots of reviews. And I don't know how to do that except to pay for reviews. And so that's why we thought that this episode was a really good idea. I mean, traditionally, and this is where I used to be a real hard pass on this, traditionally editorial reviews were earned and not paid for, right? And then some of the legacy outlets like Publishers Weekly and Kirkus, I remember when Kirkus first started doing paid reviews, I mean, they got a lot of backlash. Now they started doing paid reviews, I want to say, gosh, maybe 7, 8, maybe even 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been quite a while. But they got a lot of backlash. So in order to offset that backlash,
right,
it used to be like a joke in the industry that if you paid Kirkus to get a review, it would always be a bad review because at that time, everybody was like, oh, if you're paying for a review, it's always going to be a good review. And Kirkus was like, neener, 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 like, I got you there. We're just going to put a whole bunch of bad reviews out there. So, and now obviously that's kind of leveled out a little bit. But that's where things used to be. And now, really the rise of the influencer has changed. And, the combination of there are so many books published, there's a book published every 8 seconds, and the rise of the influencer has, they're like, well, we really only have so much time, and here's what we charge. And I mean, and Amy, you've even seen some independent book bloggers have tip jars, right? And how do they use those?
Yep. It's wild. Like, yeah. So tip jars, or there's, the buy me a coffee thing that kind of,
right. Yeah.
Remember that got really popular for a while. And I feel like either I'm not as interesting and I'm not seeing as much as I used to, but that seemed to be huge for a while and it kind of died off. Maybe nobody was using it. I can honestly say I never did.
Yeah.
It's like I never, but yeah, same thing. Tip jars, buy me a coffee. There's all these, now there's just like these little nickel and diming ways to kind of jump the line, so to speak.
Right.
But to your point, so many books being published, there is a finite number of outlets and or thought leaders that have big enough platforms to where, you know what I mean? People are pitching them over and over and over again. And yeah, I mean, I don't have the exact right answer for how to make all of that work, but it seems to be going to having tiered options, including some that are paid, or like we've seen before, Penny, too, the type of coverage you get may change based on, how much time the influencer has. So they may offer you just a spotlight or something where they're not actually reading the book, but they're going to give you a little coverage or something like that. So it's amazing how many different options are out there now. But the paid thing is really seems to be something that even influencers are able to jump on now and demand some form of payment for their time.
Right. And, and we're really focused in this particular podcast about talking about how to weigh, like, should you do it versus should you not do it? So hopefully, like, if you're in this situation or you've been in this situation, hopefully this podcast will answer your question. But little known fact, broadcast media, televised media has done the pay to play. And I don't believe that they still do it. I mean, I have never pitched somebody in television and they said, oh, well, give us $5,000 and we'll put this person on television. I think because for them, it's a very slippery slope, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's sort of I mean, it's not that different from an influencer, but it's very different. I mean, there's a perceived sort of endorsement behind, like, if you're going to have somebody on your show or whatever. And that kind of died. I mean, there may be still some places out there that do it. And if I'm wrong, by all means, reach out to us and let us know, and we'll put a correction up in the next show. But they used to do that. And I remember the first time somebody wrote me back, they're like, yeah, for X amount. And I was just like, who are you? Like, are you serious? It was the weirdest thing. I think this was maybe 12 or so. It was a while ago. It was 12 or so years ago. But, and to some degree, part of the reason why I was very much a hard no on this, where I've sort of changed that, is it's hard to be an unknown, right? It's hard to be a first time author. We get it. A lot of our shows are dedicated to first time authors. You have no platform, no newsletter, no audience. And getting all of the bigger things that other authors have, or that somebody that you're following has, or somebody in your book group, like it just doesn't, it's harder to get to that place. It's harder to get traction, right? It's not impossible, it's just harder, just because there's so much competition out there.
Right. Just the sheer volume,
Yeah, right, just the sheer volume. I mean, and we've talked about this too, Amy, about that it's really a little bit of a catch-22 for authors. And even
Yeah.
even if it's your second book too, right? I mean, even if
Oh, yeah.
like your first book kind of languished, and because I've talked to authors who have 2 or 3 books out and they're like, now I really want to get serious about my success. And
Right. Absolutely.
they're in the same bucket a little, just to a greater degree, as the unknown author.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we don't want to give the wrong impression that, just get that first one under your belt and then all these magical doors open. It's not quite that easy. I wish that was the case. It's kind of, wouldn't that be great, Penny, if that was just what you had to go through? It's
That
kind
would
of
be
like
amazing.
your rite of passage is just get that first one done and then everything falls into place and it's amazing from there.
Right. I mean, and so technically, like my 24th book, 25th,
You should be retired by now.
I am doing this podcast from my villa in the south of France.
Right, exactly. But yeah, it is really hard because, again, we help our clients with this all the time, finding that balance between you need credibility to earn coverage, but how do you earn credibility if you're not getting any coverage?
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of an impossible decision sometimes. And that's why it is getting to the point where sometimes the only options in terms of, especially if you want to get to that next level, you can definitely get reader reviews without spending a bunch of money. I mean, it takes a bunch of hard work. There's no magical way around that. But when we talk to authors all the time that say, I want to get on a podcast, I want to get covered by a big time influencer, I want to get interviewed by a magazine. Like, these are the kind of things we're talking about in terms of these are next level opportunities. And it's really hard to get these if you don't have a platform already in existence, so you really have to build that resume. And sometimes paying for opportunities it is going to be the quickest and most direct way to get there. And even though I gave the Reddit example as, something that may not be what you're looking for, there are a bunch of great, I mean, we see this with podcasts, Penny, these great kind of mid-level podcasts, not ones that if we said it right now, everybody listening would know what they're called, but these shows are getting some good following, and they will even have small fees just to cover production costs,
Yeah.
and things like that are starting to be a lot more common than they used to be.
A lot of podcasts are doing that now. I mean, we're not, because we don't have guests on. And by the way, just as a reminder, we've never had a guest. We must get like 3 or 4 pitches from people. Hey, would like to be a guest on your show. I'm like, you don't listen to the show. Pay attention, people. We're not guests on. But I think, with in particular, I think the rise of TikTok, because I noticed this, a handful of years ago, however long TikTok's been around, that these creators were charging for coverage due to the volume of requests. And so, which again, I understand, but here's the thing. And I guess maybe it's a good time to really dive into should you not, what to look for, because the example that I'm going to give you is, so there was a TikTok influencer who came to us, wanted to review a book, charged a substantial amount of money to review it. So I want to say it was like $3,500 or $5,000. It was somewhere in that range. But when you looked at their TikTok account and then their Instagram account, because they both mirrored each other, she did ads, but her ads were her ads were like they weren't traditional ads. They were real-time ads. Like she was, and she did everything. Like she did books, but then she also got invited onto a cruise. And so then she was in a room and I'm like, I want to get invited onto a cruise. Like, how do people get, like, how do you get that? Right.
Right.
So she got invited onto a cruise. And then when you looked at her feed, you noticed a real separation between the volume of plays and likes that she got for her authentic coverage. Like, this is just me in a car getting, my morning Java or whatever, versus her on a cruise, as lovely as that video was. So that's something that I think, and we'll talk about the money in just a second, but that's one thing that I think you really have to look at too is if somebody is asking you, there's a whole bunch of different markers that we're going to cover in this show, but if somebody is asking you to pony up some money to be in their TikTok feed or Instagram feed or whatever, BookTube, whatever, take a look and see what they've produced previously, because this was something where I don't blame the influencer for doing all these things because they're getting paid, and she's, half my age, maybe more. That's embarrassing. And she's making bank and she's going on cruises and all this other stuff, but it doesn't really benefit our author, because every time that she does something that dips into the ad side of things, the visibility drops tremendously. I mean, I want to say like she would get 10,000 views on a regular post, and she got something like 300 on some of the ad posts that I saw. So there was a tremendous drop in coverage.
Mm-hmm.
For
Exactly.
that,
Yeah. And then at that point, is it a review or is it an ad? And do they
Right.
have to do hashtag ad? Like get that, there's all these other, and maybe those of you listening, like, I don't care what they want to call it. Like and I get it. I support that 100%, but that's where this all gets very tricky. And sometimes how these fees start building up too.
Yeah, exactly. And personally, Amy, I mean, I tell authors this all the time, whether I'm teaching a class or we're getting hit up by, and I mean, we rarely get hit up by an influencer who wants money, just because our relationships with our influencers are all based on they love the books that we send them and we have a long-term relationship with them. But on the occasion when that does happen, because we try to reach out to new people and make new relationships and stuff, it's like I'll tell an author, I'm like, there's literally no ROI in a $5,000 ad. I mean,
No.
there's no, I mean, do you know how many books you'd have to sell to make up that $5,000 that
Yeah.
you're paying this influencer? And then the problem with that is that, I mean, especially like you also have to look. So if you're debating this, I recommend, we did a show on how to market your book without social media, which I realize is the complete like anti this show because we're talking about social media influencers. But in that show, we talk about the burn rate, right? So there is an instant burn rate or an instant decay on TikTok. So you only have like a microsecond to get people interested in that video that you paid $5,000 for. And the same thing really is true for Instagram too. So you really want, I mean, I tread very cautiously with that.
Oh my gosh. And Penny, how many times, or maybe it's just me, but where I'm on Instagram or something and I'm watching a reel and it's an account that I don't follow. And then you like your finger hits the screen or something and you lose it and you'll never see it again.
You'll
I'm like,
never see it again. And I cannot tell you, Instagram, if you're listening, I've lost a lot of really cute dog videos. It's
so many things. Or I'll
it's
be watching.
upsetting.
Yes,
It's
I'll be
upsetting.
watching a recipe or something like that. I'm like, oh, I think I might want to make this. And then my stupid
Boom.
fingers touch the screen and it's gone. I'm like, well, I'll never be able to make that because I will
Well,
never find it again in the pits of Instagram,
right. And unless you know the name or whatever. I mean, I even tried, I got so desperate one time trying to find something again. I looked up the hashtag. And let me tell you this right now, Instagram, your hashtags leave a lot to be desired because you can't find it. You can't find it on TikTok. I mean, TikTok has a different algorithm, but it's still the same problem. So when that vanishes, it's just gone.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a little terrifying. Everybody right now is listening is just like, why are they even doing this show? They're hating on everything.
But I will say, for what it's worth, and you mentioned this, Penny, we have some great relationships with some genuine, like super fan, super reader,
Yeah.
book influencers that do these extremely thoughtful, extensive, detailed posts, and their Instagrams are beautiful, and it's really what they do. You know what I mean? And I think that's something too that stands out as well. So to your point about the gal that kind of is a little all over the place. Yes, she's got a great following. Yes, she probably sells a lot of product for some of the companies that partner with her, but is she necessarily the right match for a book? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think, if somebody is, I mean, if you're going to throw $100 at something, you got to figure, even though there's more ROI in $100 than there is in 5,000, um, you got to figure that if you're going to pay everybody $100, that's going to add up really quickly. So be really selective. The other thing is that if somebody, and we had this actually, this for whatever reason, this came up on a team call, and I was talking about when I used to run Google Ads for our company, which we don't do anymore. But um, and at that time, some book bloggers were saying, well, okay, so we'll review your book if you buy an ad on our site. And this was, again, this goes back 10 years, whatever. And when somebody invites you to put an ad, says, look, you can put an ad up on our site, they have to release their metrics, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to be transparent about their metrics. You should be able to get, and I don't necessarily mean just here's a page on my website so you can see my numbers. Um, Depending on how much I mean, for $100, you're probably not going to get a real deep dive transparency, but you should be able to get metrics.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I mean, if anybody wants me to pay anything, I'm asking for, I want to see your, and I want to see your best videos and I want to see what they're about. And I want to, so those are some really smart questions that you can ask if somebody is offering this. And it is it's super tempting to do it.
Oh yeah.
It's
And
super
again,
tempting.
yep.
Huh?
Oh no, I was going to say yes, it's very tempting, and even the difference between a site that is very book centric that does a lot of posting versus are you getting an opportunity where you're definitely getting a review? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they both have, those are both good things. I mean,
Yeah.
I think coverage is great. I like to use the term owning more online real estate. And I think that's a fabulous thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to how much you're going to pay, if we're talking about pay to play opportunities, really deciding, be very strategic about if you're going to have a budget for paying for some opportunities, be really careful about which ones you choose, because you
Yeah.
can get on some smaller, like we're talking quality over quantity here, smaller sites that have maybe a smaller reach, but the people they do reach really listen to them, things like that, niche podcasts that don't charge anything,
Right.
they'll get you
Right.
covered. It takes some hard work, but it's worth it. And it's work you need to be doing anyway. Sorry if that's a huge spoiler, but it's work you need to be doing anyway. And we've talked about that before on media shows, Penny, about balancing going after different levels, different tiers, knowing what makes sense for your platform, for your brand, for your budget, all those kind of things come into play.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing though too, and it's funny because we're working with an author that I talked to last week, and she and I were talking about so we're working in conjunction with her publisher, and they're doing a lot of the big media. And she's like, I'm really, and I thought this was such a savvy thing to say. She goes like, I'm really not that impressed with big media. She goes, I would rather have somebody that is narrowly focused, that is a quote unquote sort of micro influencer that has, because she goes, it's better for me if somebody has 10,000 followers and they're all like eager and excited to hear everything that this person says versus if they have 10 million followers and like, four of them go out and buy something like that. You know what I mean? So I think that's another thing too. As an author, we always feel especially if you're new in this industry, because you read a lot online. Maybe you go to maybe you're in a writers group, or maybe you went to a writers conference. There's all these authors doing all this fabulous stuff, and oh, I'm so famous, and all this other stuff. Like, I get it. I get that it's really hard to not want to pay to be part of that exclusive group, right? But the other thing though too is that I think looking for those micro influencers who are really dedicated to your topic, who are dedicated to, putting out really, really quality content,
Hmm.
you are so much better served. And a lot of times building relationships with them starts early, and I'll mention what I mean about that in a second. But I mean, those are some relationships that, especially if you're writing more books on this topic, that you can carry through year after year after year. Um, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure after 5 years, I'm almost positive we've done a show on brand marketing versus book marketing. So talking about, because a lot of times authors ask us, I mean, we've done a show on this, haven't we, Amy? Like when authors ask us, okay, my book comes out in 3 months or 5 months or 2 months or whatever,
Hmm.
what can I do now? And we talk to them about brand marketing. So getting out there and talking, following influencers, commenting on their posts, making friends, networking, doing all the things. Have we done a show on that?
I'm sure we have. We could certainly do another one though, because we
We should
definitely
do
get that question enough
we should
that,
do another one. Yeah.
yep.
Because when you start early enough, and I apologize to those of you listening, you're just like, oh, thanks, Penny, my book comes out next week. And
Yeah. It's always next time.
there's always next time. But that's where, when you start, the best time to network is when you don't have anything to sell. So that's the other thing too, is that as you start to build those relationships, like we have built those relationships after 25 years of being in business, those same relationships you can also foster and grow. And then the issue of paying becomes potentially, hopefully, less prominent. I mean, I don't think that, I don't believe that this is going to be like a universal thing in the industry where everybody, you just pay to play all. I find that really hard to believe that that's ever going to be really a thing.
No, but I think you're right, Penny. At some point, timelines, time crunches where you really, it's the one thing you forgot to do, or you're
Yeah.
like, or your book maybe takes off pretty well with readers and you're like, I want to capitalize on this momentum. Maybe I need to pay and get an industry review to kind of keep this going. There's a lot of ways where you can be strategic about smartly paying for a well-named review or something like that. But just know what you're getting into. And to the point of the personal Reddit, and like you said, Penny, get to know the person's content, read some of the reviews that outlet has put out recently,
Yeah.
get an idea for whether or not they sound like they came from somebody who really invested time in the book, or if they sound like a glorified synopsis, you know what I mean? And then you have to decide, like, do I really want to pay for that? Or is this something that I'm going to hold off on?
Well, and Amy, I think as a final point, and you put this actually in the show notes, and we haven't really, really addressed this, is do they disclose payment? Because that also creates potentially
Mm-hmm.
a less than authentic feature, right?
Right.
I mean, because they might put a hat on the post or something,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But
Um,
yeah, I don't want anybody listening to feel like, oh no, like I paid for something or I was going to do that. We're not saying that there's a hard and fast yes or no rule to this by any means, but since it is becoming more common, definitely I'm glad we talked about this because these decisions are hard. And especially for those of you that are just starting out, we fully respect that you have a lot of decisions to make and it gets overwhelming.
well, and I think that one of the things that we've seen a lot, and these companies shall remain nameless, even though you and I both know, and listeners, if you listen for a while, you know that I really want to name, like, I want to name names. I want to call people out. But there are some companies out there that will resell ad space and package it like they're actually doing PR for you, right? So
Right.
I talked to an author 6 months ago, I guess, or maybe it was late last year, and he was like, I'm working with a company and they're doing PR, and they had me buy an ad in the New York Times for $5,000. It was maybe more, maybe it was 7,500 at that point. And basically what he was getting was a tiny little
Mm,
picture of his book with 20 other books in the ad. Like, it wasn't like he wasn't getting buying a whole page in the New York Times, right? It
no.
was just the thing. Nobody's going to see that. Like, I'm sorry, with all due respect, like, we all love the New York Times. We get it. Like, the book section, everybody wants to be in there. I get it. You do not want to be in there with ads. So there are some things that are still a hard pass with me, that
Hmm.
being one of them. So that's another thing to kind of be careful of, is if you're looking at companies and the entire proposal is just where they're running ads,
Hmm.
I would, because, honestly, I mean, because people ask me that all the time when I'm on the phone with them, like, well, do you do paid ads on Kirkus? I'm like, no, why would we? Because you can do that on your own.
Right,
You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, you want to hire a marketing firm to do the things to get the ungettable get. You want to hire a marketing team to do things that you can't do on your own. Otherwise, unless you're like super busy, which is, I respect that. But I mean, no, we're not paying for reviews in Publishers Weekly or Kirkus, not because we're have strong feelings or we're hating on all the things. Like, just that, like, you could do that on your own.
Right. You don't want to hire a team for that kind of work. Again, unless you just have a bunch of money to throw around and then, I guess throw it our way, I suppose.
And with that, that was
But
our own.
you're right, Penny. There are plenty of companies that are like, yes, that's what we want you to pay us for. And it's like, oh, that part's not, I personally don't even find that fun. Like I tell people all the time that write in, I was like, believe it or not, Penny and I actually have our hands in a lot of this stuff because those are the things we love to do. So yes, we're an email and yes, Penny's on the phone, but believe it or not, we love the time we get to spend with the actual creative marketing efforts. Like, you know,
We love it. And
yes, that's what we get excited about. And that's why we like doing these shows too, because we get it like that kind of fuels our fire too. But I think some people are really surprised when they find out that you and I just aren't in email all day. And that's how we spend our time. I'm like, no, actually, we try to do that as little as possible so we can actually go back to the fun marketing stuff that we like to do.
yeah, I mean, working with our authors. And actually, it's funny because we had a really big brainstorming week last week, and we come up with some great ideas for authors. And actually, I'm going to email you, Amy, after the show. I want to do a show on brand marketing versus book marketing, because obviously we haven't done it in a while, but also just, I mean, email kills creativity. I mean, it just, I'm sorry, it just does. But we love being in that creative space. And I think that if that's what makes it hard, I think, for authors who are also in there doing their own marketing, they're like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to do my own accounting, right?
Right.
Authors, you know what I mean? They don't, like, it just sucks. Like this, and I had an author tell me that the other day, like, this just sucks the life out of me. I'm like, I get it. If you don't like it, you shouldn't do it. You know what I mean?
Right. Mm-hmm.
I would love to know, and you can leave it in the comments on social media, because obviously we promote these shows on our Instagram feed and my TikTok videos, which I just started doing. I really hate doing video, but I'm going kicking and screaming into the TikTok video thing. Finally, like, I'm such not a trend follower. I such a but anyway, I'm finally here. So anyway, welcome me, all TikTokers, because I'm finally joining the party. But I'd love to know if y'all, anybody, did you pay? What was your experience? Join in this conversation, because I think the other thing that I really love about this podcast is that it does get authors talking and sharing with other authors. And that's a really cool thing. So we also love reviews. And by the way, if this is your first show, we're generally not quite so bitter. So no, we are, go back through, if first off, if this is your first show, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. But go back through some of our because we have 5 years of shows. So definitely, check out some of our list of prior shows that we've done. And We love reviews wherever you listen to podcasts, so please leave us a review. We got a couple of new reviews, which we're always very excited. We always check that before we start recording the show, we get very excited about that. You do have to follow the show in order to be able to leave a review. So follow us. You'll get an episode every Friday in your app or wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.